I think it's time we say good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour at the beginning of a local shelter-in-place order to help people remain connected in one of the oldest ways known to our species, which is telling stories around the fire. We were hoping it wouldn't be the kind of fires that are happening right now in California, but we think that we're out of the rolling blackout zones, and we hope all of you are too. So here we are, several months later, and we're sheltering in stories together. So welcome back to those returning, and welcome to those joining us for the first time. This week's format is the same as usual. We have two writers, a little less than 30 minutes each, no Q&A, and a short PSA for a few nonprofits. You can keep up to date about upcoming authors at storyhour2020.com and see programs you may have missed at the Story Hour page on Facebook. Tonight's readers are Anatoly Belilovsky and Alicia Hilton. Now first, if you are fortunate enough to help others during this time, please consider a donation to one or both of our two featured nonprofits, the Red Door Animal Shelter and Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Red Door Animal Shelter is a nonprofit, no-kill shelter committed to helping animals in need. Its primary focus is on cats, dogs, and rabbits, the three most popular pets in the United States, as well as the occasional stray pet duck or backyard chicken. Red Door Animal Shelter provides a cageless environment, giving animals a closest-to-home experience. While the emphasis is on rehoming the animals through resourceful adoption programs, the shelter does offer permanent residence for those few animals not placed in homes. You can learn more at reddoorshelter.org. The Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America is a nonprofit organization serving writers of speculative fiction, like the ones here. SFWA's mission is to inform, support, promote, defend, and advocate for its member writers. Charitable donations go to a variety of causes, including outreach programs, genre-related grants, the SFWA Legal Fund for authors who must take a writing-related dispute to court, and the SFWA Emergency Medical Fund, which offers grants to members facing unexpected medical expenses. You can learn more at sfwa.org. If you're here on Zoom, please mute your mic now. Feel free to leave your camera on. It can be nice for our readers to see their distant audience. Chime in on the text chat if you like. And if you are joining us on Facebook, thank you, but please understand that we are not seeing your messages. So our first reader tonight is Anatoly Belilovsky. Anatoly Belilovsky was born in a city that went through 6 or 7 owners in the last century, all of whom used it for a lot more than driving to church on Sundays. He is old enough to remember tanks rolling through it on their way to Czechoslovakia in 1968. After being traded to the US for a shipload of grain and a defector to be named later, he learned English from Star Trek reruns, apparently well enough to be admitted into SFWA in spite of chronic cat deficiency. He has sold original and translated stories and poems to Nature, FNSF, Analog, Asimov's, Daily SF, Podcastle, Casma, UFO, Stupefying Stories, Cast of Wonders, and other markets. There actually are a few that he hasn't sold something to, apparently. He blogs about writing at loldoc, like lolcat, the doctor, .net. Anatoly, your bio is so fascinating, I almost hope that it's your fiction.
Well, no, none of it is actually fiction. And I have this chronic problem of coming up with fiction that matches things that I've seen in reality.
Well, there you go. Makes it all seem very real. What do you have for us tonight?
Well, I am a short fiction writer. I hope one of these days to become a tall fiction writer, but that doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon. I have a lot of flash stories, which I'm pretty much going to select on the fly. And I'm going to mix and match funny and less funny. And I'm going to start with something presumably funny, or hopefully funny. It's called Squidderella. as in squid Cinderella. Squiderella. You all ready? Excellent. Once upon a time, in a kingdom by the sea, there lived a simple, perfectly normal couple, Squaderella, a non-com in the army of the kingdom, and Squinterella, her wife, exempt from military service due to an unfortunate congenital visual impairment. Their joy, born of their love for each other, increased tenfold with the birth of their daughter, Squiderella. But it was short-lived, as Squaderella became another casualty of the cachalot conflict, and Squinterella was left a widow. She was soon courted by Squaleria, a merchant, who had two daughters from a previous marriage, Squawkterella and Squicterella. Life soon became nearly unbearable for Squirrella. As her mother Squinterella turned a blind eye to Squaleria's machinations, the wicked stepmother evicted Squinterella from her room and forced her to live in a damp, clammy cellar, giving her comfortable bed to her two wicked stepsisters. I don't want to share with her, squawked Squicterella, pointing at Squicterella. Ew, said Squicterella. Squaleria bared her teeth, and silence fell, all arguments cut short. As time went on, the three girls grew as the adults grew older. As Squidderella outgrew her clothes, she had to wear her stepsister's cast-offs, but none would fit her, save a pair of long stockings and 8 knee socks, for obvious reasons. What fantasies ran through her head, none can say, but they certainly kept her busy. One day, King Squire rode up to their door on a bay seahorse. Hear ye, he bellowed. The king's 2 sons are now nubile, and all the maidens of the kingdom are hereby summoned to the great ball, so that out of their number brides may be selected. How narrow-minded of the king, Squawkterella squawked. Only maidens? Ew, said Squicterella. Shut up, said Squaleria. It cuts the competition in half. And she bared her teeth, ending the argument. Squidderella was not told of this for obvious reasons, but she heard the squire nonetheless, as her stepsisters fought over finery on sale at the Squander Square department store. She put on her 2 long stockings and 8 knee socks and stole away from the house and to the palace, where she hid in a corner, blending into the wallpaper. Of the beginning of the ball, the less said the better. Awkward does not begin to describe it. The king was about ready to call it a night at midnight, when at the first stroke of the tower clock, a stream of water squirted from one corner of the ballroom and extinguished all the candles. Much noise ensued, and when the candles were relit, they revealed, among general confusion, both the princes and 8 of the maidens sitting in a circle on the floor, with pole-axed expressions and great big caviar-eating grins, and 2 long stockings and 8 knee socks scattered about. WTF, said Squicterella. Not fair, squawked Squicterella. Who did this? The king thundered. I'm telling, squawked Squicterella, but then Squaleria bared her teeth, cutting her off. Nobody's telling nobody nothing, she hissed, or else. Thus it came to pass the 2 princes and the 8 maidens rode around the kingdom, carrying the 2 long stockings and the 8 knee socks to find the person to whom they belonged, never stopping to try them on, because everybody they saw could be ruled out immediately for obvious reasons. At last they stopped before the house in whose cellar Squidderella dwelled. Quick, said Squaleria. You 2 get on your head and knees. I'll put my hands in my pockets and ride you. That's 8 plus 2. Get. Why do I have to? Squawked Squicterella. Ew, said Squicterella. Squaleria bared her teeth, cutting the argument short. Thus they came outside their house, the wicked stepmother riding the 2 wicked stepsisters. What the actual? Said the 8 maidens. Ew, said the 2 princes. But before they could turn around and hoof it back to the palace, Squidderella slithered out of the cellar door, splendid in her nakedness, flashing her chromatophores and wiggling her tentacles, and once again there was no need to try on the 2 long stockings and 8 knee socks for obvious reasons. And the 2 princes, 8 maidens, and Squidderella rode off to the palace and lived happily ever after in peace and prosperity, because the next time the cachalot came to invade the kingdom by the sea, They saw the princess and the princess's caviar-eating grins and turned back in fear that whatever caused them may be contagious. End of story. All right. So that may have been mildly amusing. I will now read something that probably isn't. And it's a story called Bottled Up. It was published in Nature. Bottled Up. You won't like it, said the corkscrew. A most disappointing product, not what I expect from a Grand Cru winery at all. Hardly any nose to speak of, and the tannins are totally unbalanced. You really should pull me out of this cork, lay the bottle down for a few more years, and make yourself a nice cup of tea. He had made it for her once, and she'd pretended he got it right, but he knew he hadn't. The tea she made herself was so much better. Its aroma suffused the whole house. She would sit in that enormous old chair in her comfy old sweater, 2 sizes too big, feet tucked under her, nose in the teacup, eyes half shut behind steamed over glasses. Her smile would light up the room more than the fireplace ever did, and he would just sit and look at her for hours on end. He might be looking at her still if she weren't dead. Just stop it, he said through his teeth, eyes blurring, hands beginning to shake. Are you going to chug the wine? Asked the corkscrew. He looked around, opened the cabinet, selected a glass. That's a white wine glass, said the corkscrew. So? The volatile scents won't be properly concentrated, said the corkscrew. It will interfere with the proper enjoyment of the wine. What are you, my mother? He said. No, I am not your mother. I am Smorkscrew, a beverage management solution equipped with artificial intelligence. Now, what food were you considering to accompany this wine? He looked around, again pointed at the dish. This, he said. Peanuts, said the corkscrew. That'd be an insult even to this inferior excuse for Valpolicella. Haven't you got any cheese? Fresh mozzarella would be perfect. Or turkey prosciutto and melon. Be sure to slice the prosciutto very thin. She's dead, he shouted. Can't you get that through your whatever you use instead of a head? I know she's dead, said the corkscrew. It was my honor to open many a bottle for you and your guests as you sat Shiva. Many people came. Everyone loved her, he said. She wasn't there, said the corkscrew. She was dead, remember? What's your point? He said. Get it, point. He tried to laugh, but only a sob came out. They came for you, said the corkscrew. Many people. They all love you. And now, where are they now? A phone call away. Screw you, he said. Get it? Screw you. He turned away, covered his face with his hands. I want to be alone, he whispered. Just open the damn bottle. She wouldn't like it, said the corkscrew. She's not here to not like it, hit it off. She's not in this room. She's not in this house. She's anywhere on this earth, anywhere under the sun, anywhere except, he clenched his fist, open the bottle. Just, I'll get a proper glass. I'll make some sandwiches. I'll sit in her chair. I'll cuddle her sweater. It won't be like I'm drinking alone. I'll drink to her and I'll drink to me. Just open it. She's not in that bottle either, said the corkscrew. What makes you such a damn expert on hers? He screamed. I am an expert system, you know, said the corkscrew, able to access the totality of information about the two of you throughout the World Wide Web, and to correlate its implications upon the problem at hand. Would my medical history be part of that totality? He asked quietly. I must regretfully decline to divulge trade secrets of Smorkscrew LLC, said the corkscrew. However, consider this. I was her present to you. The process of gift selection gave me an opportunity to perform a thorough assessment of her character and motivations. What you mean is she loved me and she didn't want me to drink myself to death, he said, in case trailed off. Hopkins. The cherry tree shook in the wind beyond the window, shedding the last of its dried brown leaves. It had been white with bloom the day they packed to go on their second honeymoon. The sun had shone so bright, the shadows so crisp. She knew then, didn't she? He asked. Yes, said the corkscrew. She found out about the cancer, and then we went on our anniversary cruise, the best vacation ever, and she bought you for me as a present, and I thought it was cute and thanked her. But I had got her a pair of diamond earrings, so it kind of irked me for a while that all she got me was a stupid corkscrew, and all I said was cute. And then a week later, we got back, she told me she was going to die. And then she died, and I never said I was sorry. Apology accepted, said the corkscrew. It wound itself from the cork and rolled toward the drawer, posing at the counter's edge as he shook with sobs too long in coming. The end. All right, I seem to have 14 minutes, is that correct? 14 minutes, yes, okay. All righty then. Okay, hither and yon. By way of hand, anybody here Star Trek fan? Yay. All right. Hither and yon. So how'd you guys get together? Katie asked. We stopped at the top of the rise, leaned against a pink wall in the shade of an awning. Janie and I and the couple we met at dinner, first night of the cruise. It was an effort to remember their names, Katie and Kevin. I kept thinking of them as Lucy and Ralph, as in Ricardo and Cramden. George and I met at a cancellation day party, said Janie. For a moment, I flashed on Janie as I saw her that day, gift wrapped in black tights and a golden tunic. A Hosey Watson day party, said Kevin. June 3rd, 2009, I said. 40 years to the day since Turnabout Intruder aired. The final episode. Janie came dressed as Kirk. I looked at Janie and she at me, and once again my breath caught. Our eyes had met that day through the dry ice fog that poured from a punch bowl. Hers was set to stun. A smile pulled my cheeks like a tipsy great aunt at a wedding rehearsal. And you went on a cruise for your second anniversary, said Kate. How romantic. I bet he never forgets your anniversary like you do half the time, right, Kevin? I thought Kirk was a man, Kevin said. He was, Janie answered, except in that episode he gets body swapped. I borrowed a command tunic, she squared her shoulders. You must have looked hot, said Kevin. Don't go changing the subject, said Kate. We're talking about how thoughtless you are. Once, Kevin muttered. I forgot it once. Right, said Katie. I can count. We forgot our second anniversary. That's 1 out of 2, half the time. Kevin took a breath to say something, thought better of it, and deflated in silence. Janie did the eyebrow shrug, Vulcan style. I looked around anywhere but at Kate and Kevin. We turned and walked toward the Hamilton wharf under a long awning shared by a dozen tiny storefronts. The air grew cooler as an onshore breeze swirled dust and fallen leaves in pirouettes and loops. A cloud drew across the sun, tempering its glare with the mercy of shade. "Ooh, look at these," said Kate, her all-penetrating voice now coming from the other side of the street. "Janie, come over here." "What time is it?" said Janie. "I think it's getting late." The last word sounded Doppler down. I turned to look. Kate had a hold on Janie's hand and one foot in the doorway of a shoe store on the other side of the street. "Hurry up, Kate," yelled Kevin from behind me. "We got a ship to catch." Janie flashed me a come hither look. Come hither and save me, that is. "I'll protect you, fair maiden," I shouted. "Sorry, neither," she shouted back. "Huh?" Katie said, her head tilted. "The naked time," Janie said. Janie loved being rescued. She never actually needed to be saved until now. I turned to follow, but with one last yank, Kate pulled Janie through the doorway, and the door slammed shut. Kevin grinned, not unsympathetically. He straightened his back and began to whistle a familiar tune. The words came to me as if he spoke them. Hello, silence, my old friend. A flash of lightning answered him. In seconds, the sky darkened and began to churn. Thunder rolled over us as air tingled with ozone. I started across the street. It wasn't that wide. A few drops of rain weren't going to stop me. I would have made it too in most places. Not in Bermuda. Halfway across, lightning and thunder hit me in a single body blow, and rain roared in my face like a rabid fire hose. Next thing I knew, Kevin was pulling me up and back under the awning, both of us soaking wet. Gee, said Kevin. I barely heard him between the downpour and the ringing in my ears. Thought you were a goner there for a second. Close call. I scrambled up. Beyond the awning, there was only a wall of rain. But I said, the girls, I'm sure the shoe store is still there, said Kevin. We can't just leave them, I said. They probably didn't even notice, he said. We'll wait here. Boat's not going to leave without us. Maybe we can go inside someplace. But I shook water out of my hair, wiped my eyes. The rain, if anything, got stronger. I backed away from the spray off the awning as if I could have gotten me wetter. Hey, check this out, said Kevin, pointing behind me. It's a video store. Let's go look. I followed Kevin's through the glass door. It closed behind us, muffling the rain to a whisper. An ancient air conditioner wheezed and rattled overhead. Fly-specked lights flickered from murk to gloom and back again. We dripped on the doormat. Let's just stay here, I said. I don't want to leave a place of mud bath. Come on in, said a muffled voice from farther inside. Kevin raised an eyebrow at me. I shrugged. We advanced a step. Kevin flicked the last of the rain from his eyes, stared at the stack in front of him. Several rows of very pretty couples stared back. Would you get a load of that, said Kevin. Chick flicks. A wall of chick flicks. Not one movie I ever heard of. I tell you, everything is for chicks these days. Chick flicks, chick shop, chick clubs. I bet a chick runs this. A tall bearded man, aged anything from 30 to 60, came out from behind the stack. He walked with a stork high-stepping gait. In his tilted face, Owl's eyes blinked, magnified by thick round glasses. Can I help you with anything? He said in a voice that would have been Bela Lugosi's if Bela Lugosi had been a Texan. Kevin and I traded a look again. You're welcome to sit out the rain, he added, blinking. Kevin blinked back at him. Sci-fi, he said. My friend here likes sci-fi. I cringed. SF is in the corner, said the proprietor, sounding like an English butler played by a Texan Bela Lugosi. Here, let me show you. Scene break. What's the matter with you, George? Kevin hissed. Can't you see he's busting your chops, yanking your chain? I get your point, I said. So let's call him on it, Kevin whispered. Give him $50 and tell him to put on the show right here, right now. I bet you he'll say the player is busted. He pointed at the TV DVD combo behind the counter. I swear I'll punch him out if he does that. I looked at the shelf. The boxes were still there. Nice, shiny, shrink-wrap boxes about the right size for DVDs with genuine-looking iridescent lettering. Star Trek, Seasons 1 through 5. Starfleet, JAG. Starfleet, Vulcan Academy. Star Trek, Midshipman. Some of the credits brought tears to my eyes. Others made my mouth water. Each sang to me its sweet siren song. Script by Philip K. Dick. Directed by John Carpenter. Guest stars, Marlon Brando, Bette Davis. I looked at the proprietor. He looked back, blinking. I looked out the window. The wind picked that particular moment to fling a sheet of 10 of rain at a glass window, turning the street outside into a mess of funhouse mirrors. Such a small decision. Kevin and I walked down one side of the street, Kate and Janie on the other, men ducking left, women right. Mirror, mirror. Kevin was probably right. It was a hoax. It had to be. There are no gateways between universes. not even in Bermuda. Well, Kevin asked. It would be, murmured a silent inner voice, raising one eyebrow, a highly illogical assumption. The odds against it are astronomical. A minuscule, tiny, infinitesimal risk. Bermuda Triangle, it's a myth. A tale to frighten children, another voice snapped. Damn it, I'm a doctor, not a folklorist. George, said Kevin. Hello? No, I said firmly. No, I don't want to make a fool of this jerk, or no, I don't want to see the final episode of Star Trek by, who did you say it was? Frank Herbert, I answered automatically, or so he says. I nodded at the salesman. The salesman grinned, tilting his head even more. So which is it? Kevin demanded. He shook stray raindrops from his nose with a sideways jerk. He would have looked like a rooster if roosters looked like fire plugs. No, I don't want to take a chance of losing Janie, I said slowly. Kevin threw up his hands. Can you believe this guy? He asked of no one in particular. The proprietor fielded the question himself. I haven't believed either of you guys since you opened your mouths, he said. You're either senile or Canadian, is what I think. Best show of all time, canceled after 3 seasons, he continued. President Heinlein would have flown us Marines out of Hanoi to take over the studio if they tried that. I wish he'd done that. I was getting bored babysitting Jap. I ran for the door, Kevin a breath behind me. Rain squalls don't last as long in Bermuda, which is just as well. You'll hardly ever be late for anything if you wait one out. I did not wait. I ran into and through the curtain of warm water, slipping on bumps and splashing through puddles until I felt a solid roll against my hands. I wiped my eyes. By sheer dumb luck, I stood against the window of the shoe store I'd seen Janie go into. I saw Kate right away, turning the slipper this way and that, inches in front of her face. It took the longest second of my life to find Janie talking with a sales girl in the dark interior of the shop. Any other day, Karen growled behind me, I'd have said you've been out in the sun too long. He pushed open the door and shoved me into the shoe store. Give me a break, I said. I can do that, George, Kevin said, more Brooklyn than usual in his voice. You want a break to your face or a break to your kneecap? Scene break. And that's why we're standing here making puddles of ourselves, Kevin concluded. Wow, said Kate, that is so romantic. Kevin, would you ever do something like that for me? I'm standing here dripping, don't I? He said, brave the element and all that. It's not the same, said Kate. How is it not the same, Kevin roared. It ran the same, we got wet the same. George had a more romantic reason, Kate declared, even if I don't understand it. Schrodinger's cat? Janie asked. I nodded, exactly. What? Kevin said. One possible explanation for the Bermuda Triangle, I said, is the many worlds hypothesis, is itself a corollary of Schrodinger's thought experiment. Please, George, English, Kevin said. Short version, I said, if this is true, I thought that watching the videos from alternate reality would collapse the wave function in that reality. It would have to stay there. And what would be wrong with that? Kevin demanded. 5 season of Star Trek, winning the Vietnam War. Or do you think that would have been bad, winning the war? Screw the war, I said. Jeannie and I wouldn't be together. Why not? Kate broke in. I always thought you were destined for each other. We would have had no reason, Janie said, to meet that day. 2 years ago, I said. 2 years, 2 days ago. If that weren't cancellation day, neither one of us would have gone to contract. No cancellation, no party. Oh, goosebumps, said Kate. Hey, rain's gone. Let's go over there again. Season 5, the proprietor looked off his glasses. What planet are you guys from? Told you he was yanking your chain. Let's go, Kate. Back to the ship. It's sailing in an hour. Everybody knows there wasn't but one season of Trek. The salesman continued. Janie started to walk toward the door. Kevin and I followed. A short one, too, only 12 episodes, the salesman continued. I guess America wasn't ready for a woman number one. I stumbled, caught myself. Janie took my hand. We walked on toward the open door. Some say, though, it was the show that helped President Bush get elected. Bush, said Kate. What's he got to do with it? Salesman laughed. He? What are you guys, Canadian? Everybody knows there's but one brain in that family, and it's Barbara. Janie froze in a doorway. I tried to stop but slipped in my own puddle. Newton's laws seem to work the same as in this universe as anywhere else. The 100 pounds or so I have on Janie swept us out the door. I grabbed an awning support to keep from falling. My momentum spun me to face the door as I clung on. Kevin's face was only visible for a second. I saw that it had to be Kate's, hand on his shoulder, fingers dug deep into the fold of his shirt. After his face receded into the dark interior of the store, slipping from sight like a drowning man's, a lightning flashed and seared on my retina the very last look. When we came back to the ship, we found no one there. When we came back into the store, we found no one there but the proprietor. Store gated, owl-eyed, and on the shelves, the 3 familiar seasons of Star Trek, the original series, plus the expected TNG, Voyager, and movies. No surprises in the credits. Ted Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, Ricardo Montalban. I looked at Janie. She looked at me and took my hand. We left without a word and walked together to the pier, touching more and talking less than ever before. Someone else had Kate's and Kevin's cabin on a cruise ship. The strangers had been there since sailing from New York. Another couple had their places at the late dinner seating. Even the memories are fading, though Kate's voice might haunt me for a while. The last I'll probably remember of Kevin, like a Cheshire Cat smile, must be that desperate last look. The come hither look. The come hither and save me look. The end.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Sorry, I went over a minute. Sorry, Alicia.
It's okay.
We won't take it out of Alicia's time. We'll be all right.
All right.
But we're going to move on straight on to our next reader and contestant for most interesting author bio ever, Alicia Hilton. Alicia Hilton is an author, law professor, arbitrator, actor, and former FBI special agent. She believes in angels and demons, magic, and monsters. Alicia's recent work has appeared in or is forthcoming in Akashic Books, Brick Moon Fiction, Bronzeville Books, Daily Science Fiction, Domain Publishing UK, Dreams and Nightmares, Tales from Omnipark, Vestarian, Year's Best Hardcore Horror, Volumes 4 and 5, and elsewhere. Her website is aliciahilton.com, and you can follow her on Twitter at aliciahilton01. Alicia, what have you brought for us tonight?
I have 2 things, unless I manage to read very speedily, and then I could read a third. But first, I'm going to read a short poem that was published in Neon. And after that, I will read a story that was written for Brick Moon Fiction.
Wonderful.
So this poem is called Insomnia, My Ugly Twin. She has 6 cuts on her abdomen and pelvis. It was smooth before the pod people came with their one-eyed snake. Snip, 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 snip. Nasty beast, always hungry. Sucked out the life seeds, left behind the sad gas, full and empty. Insomnia, my ugly twin, every night enters my bedroom. If I lock the door, she tap dances on the roof, grabs me by the hand, hot, not sexy hot, skin like the Sahara, molten to the core, fry eggs on it. But her smile makes me shiver. Come, dance with me. Her shadow beckons, diaphanous, flickering on and off my consciousness. Climb to the roof, howl and scream. That's the poem.
Wow.
Now for a change of pace, this is a coming of age fantasy story called Fairy Tales and Selkie Tales. My elven fairy ancestors had evolved, losing their wings, along with most of their magic. But 3 layers of stockings would not staunch the shimmery violet light that gleamed from my toenails, a trait that supposedly only afflicted Germanic fairies. My ancestry was Moroccan, with a splash of Germanic heritage from my mother's great-great-great-grandfather, a berserker, member of a Viking clan famed for fighting with trance-like fury. Curse or blessing, no matter what you called it, the outcome was the same. When I began menstruating, flesh grew between my toes and the nails would glow. The membrane wasn't as thick as a seal's flippers or a mermaid's tail, but it marked me as fey, which was a major problem since fairies were worth more dead than alive. I stripped off the fourth pair of stockings, a soft liner to protect my soles from itchy wool, and dropped them on the top of the pile of clothing that I left on a boulder. The chill breeze made goosebumps rise on my skin, and the hair on the back of my neck also stood up. No girl should be wandering the woods in the middle of the night, especially if she was naked. But the goddess of the lake wouldn't speak to supplicants unless they bared their flesh and their souls. Hearing tree branches clacking together, I jerked around. Amber eyes stared at me, but it was just a long-eared owl roosting in a pine tree. Moonlight shone on the lake, drawing me towards the water. I took a step, then another. What would it feel like to drown? I considered turning back, but my resolve remained as hard as the pebbles that I walked across. The water was as cold as ice. I waded deeper until I was submerged to my chest, my feet buried in silt, but I could still see light gleaming from my toes, though now it was tinted green from algae. I said, "Goddess?" Wind answered my call. I gazed across the lake, peering at the shoreline. A bird took flight, soaring past a cluster of evergreens. The wingspan was too broad to be an owl. A heron? I said, "Lady Oracle, are you there? Should I start swimming? How long do I need to hold my breath?" "Until you are dead," the Oracle replied. "Throw yourself upon the rocks if you are patient." Her laughter made ripples cascade across the water. She said, "Did you bring me a tribute, Nala?" The oracle's voice sounded like it was coming from inside my head. I looked around, but there was no one hovering above the water, no ethereal lady lurking along the shore. I said, "Yes, I have your tribute." My teeth chattered as I shivered, increasing seepage from the wound where I'd yanked out a tooth. Fortunately, fairies were like sharks. We had extra rows of teeth slumbering in our gums. If I survived the trial by water, in another moon cycle, the gap would be filled. But for now, my jaw throbbed. "Molar, canine, or incisor?" the oracle said. "Molar, my grandmother told me that a big ask requires a big payment." "Wise woman, she extracted the tooth." "I pulled it myself. Grandmother journeyed to the spirit world 2 years ago." "Murdered?" the oracle said. I shook my head. "Consumption," I said. My eyes watered and a tear rolled down my cheek. When the droplet hit the water, soothing warmth flowed across my skin, traveling from my chest to my fingertips. "You're orphaned," the oracle said. "My mother was killed by ogres when I was a baby. I live with my father," the oracle said. "Why isn't he with you? He doesn't believe in my powers." "He's at sea," I said. "Selkie?" I said, "No, my mother was a Selkie. My father's a fisherman." "You were sired by a human." The oracle laughed louder, her voice ringing like a bell, pinging back and forth between my ears. Fury made my chest constrict. I said, "My father's elven." The oracle said, "Foolish fay to leave a precious child unguarded." I said, "I'm not a child, I'm 17. All of a sudden, a whirlpool appeared, the water in front of me churning in a funnel formation. She said, "What do you desire, Nala?" I said, "Can you douse the light?" I pointed at my toes. The oracle said, "Give me your tooth." The water spun faster. I opened my palm. An invisible force sucked the tooth into the watery void. She said, What are you waiting for? Follow the tooth. I dove into the whirlpool, expecting to hit the bottom of the lake within seconds, since I hadn't waded in far. A woman's face appeared in front of me in the water, crafted from sea vegetables and shells, though the lake was not connected to an ocean. She had long tendrils of sea kelp for hair, red algae for her blushing cheeks, scallop shells for eyes, and her mouth was a conch shell. The sea kelp wrapped around my wrist and tugged, pulling me towards the center of the lake. I resisted, pulling my arms back. The vision became hazy and the kelp holding my wrist disappeared. Panicking, I dove in pursuit and kicked my legs vigorously, following the oracle. As the water became murkier, the pressure in my lungs increased and air bubbles flowed from my mouth. The oracle's face reappeared, but instead of sea kelp for hair, she had moray eels swirling around her head, more than a dozen, their beady eyes watching me. The eel closest to me lashed out, sinking its needle-sharp teeth into my right forearm. I've never felt such intense pain. The agonizing sensation traveled from my arm through my spine. I thrashed and screamed, but the fangs dug deeper, gripping my arm like it was locked in a vice. The oracle's lips curled in a smile. She said, "It's not too late. You want to turn back?" I quit struggling. Opening my mouth, I inhaled, sucking water into my lungs. The eels vanished. Miraculously, my pain was gone, replaced by a strange elation. I smelled jasmine perfume, the scent my maternal grandmother Miriam had always worn. The fragrance strengthened until I felt invisible arms cradling me in a comforting embrace. Light shone from the oracle's face, beaming from her eyes, along with flickering images. Two mountain ogres tied an elven fairy to a slab of wood. Though their young captive's shoulders were trussed with thick twine, he still fought, howling as he kicked and thrashed. The ogre, wearing a leather eye patch over his left eye, punched the fairy, crack, cutting his forehead and knocking him unconscious. The ogre said, "Arms or legs?" "Arms," his partner said. They tore the shirt from the fairy's body and tossed it on the ground. Though the elven boy had the slim physique of a child, curly golden hair covered his chest. Stripping off their quarry's deerskin boots and trousers, they stared at the violet light gleaming from his toenails. The ogre with the eye patch said, "Berserker gong!" He palpated the fairy's arms and legs. Grabbing another rope, he lashed it around the ankles. Then he picked up a long needle, speared the fairy's left arm, and attached a metal tube to the needle. The other ogre repeated the procedure, jabbing the fairy's right arm. The fairy's life force flowed through the tubing, making a squirting sound as it emptied into metal buckets. After they'd needled the legs and attached another set of tubes, the ogre with the eye patch said, "You hungry?" His partner grunted and rubbed his bulging belly. "Ravenous," he said. "What do you fetch? Mutton or beef?" "Veal, young ones are tender." The brute with the eye patch belched, displaying a mouthful of rotten teeth. "Watch him, he's a feisty bastard." He nodded at the fairy who was being bled, then walked towards a team of Icelandic horses that were pulling a wagon loaded with wood. He waved at the elderly ogre that was sitting in the driver's seat. The ogre with the eye patch said, "When are we breaking for supper?" The elderly ogre said, "9 more fay waiting to be milked. Grab a bite while you work." "Aye, my lord," he said. With a spring in his step, the ogre with the eye patch turned. As he walked back through the clearing, leaping over puddles, he sang, "Fingers and toes, kneecaps and elbows, crunchy bones, crunchy bones." He smacked his lips and repeated the ditty. When he reached his partner, he said, "Fay flesh for supper, under a thigh, there's plenty of meat to spare." The other ogre said, "Splendid, I'll take the haunch." He loosened the ropes they'd lashed around the fairy's ankles. Grabbing their quarry by the waist, he rolled the fairy onto his side. Movement caused the tube that was bleeding the left leg to detach. Crimson fluid spattered on the dirt. "Bugger it all," the ogre said. His back creaked when he leaned down and reattached the tubing to the needle. While he was busy, his partner sank his prominent canines into the fairy's thigh, tearing off a chunk of muscle. The fairy regained consciousness and screamed. Instantly, the golden hair on his body thickened and became darker. His nose and jaw jutted out. His shoulders broadened. Fingernails became claws. Within seconds, he transformed, becoming a huge brown bear. The ogre that had bitten him screamed. He tried to flee, but the bear was faster. The great furry beast snarled as it snapped the ropes and pounced on the ogre. The bear opened his jaws wide like a snake and chomped into the ogre's skull, cracking the bones. A little girl with long, curly black hair, just like mine, tapped a harpsichord's ivory keys. The tinkling sound was discordant yet compelling. Music that spoke of magic, broken promises, and heartache. She couldn't have been much older than 3, but her fingers flowed up and down the keyboard with such dexterity. She was clearly a prodigy, or a witch. The room where she played was simply furnished with an iron stove on the hearth, a woven rug on the worn oak floor, a spinning wheel in the corner, and a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs. Yet the harpsichord was fit for a ballroom. Crafted from gleaming wood and ornamented with gold, it was a much fancier instrument than the battered piano that my grandmother had taught me to play. A woman wearing a ragged gown and a shawl wrapped around her hair and shoulders walked into the room and sat on the bench beside the girl. The woman said, "You played the correct notes, but you've forgotten the tempo." She placed her hands upon the keys and said, "Dolce, sweetly, like this." The woman's accent was aristocratic, but her hands were chapped like a servant. I couldn't see her face. She repeated several measures that the child had played. The girl grasped the music that was sitting on the stand and turned the page. The woman played on, increasing the tempo, her hands flying across the ivories with such speed. Sparks flew from her fingertips. 1, 2, 3, so many I lost count. Higher and higher the sparks rose, twinkling like starlight above their heads. Tears streamed down the little girl's face as she watched the dancing specks of fire. She said, "I miss Mother." The woman lifted her hands from the keys and patted the girl's shoulder. She said, "I miss her too, but we see her whenever we gaze at the sky." "I want to be with her now. Why can't I become a star?" the girl sobbed. The woman shook her head. "Wanting and needing are different things. It's not your time, Miriam." "Please," the woman said, "hold out your hand." Sparks drifted from the ceiling and settled on the girl's palm, creating a glowing ball. "Clutch them," the woman said. "Squeeze tighter." "It burns," the girl said. She opened her hand and flung the ball of fire against the wall. The girl's flesh sizzled. The skin in her palm burned in the shape of an 8-pointed star, just like the scar my grandmother Miriam bore. Selkies were supposed to fear sharks, but the seal woman leapt onto the hammerhead's back and dug her fingers into its gills. Her eyes widened with excitement, flecks of gold gleaming in the jade green irises. Flicking her tail, she swatted the shark. Bucking like a horse that wanted to unseat its rider, the predator thrashed, but the selkie wouldn't let go. The shark spun in a roll, making the seal woman's long auburn hair swirl about her face. Rising towards the surface of the water, the hammerhead scraped against a coral reef, cutting its own flesh. Crimson stained the water. A pod of dolphins took up the chase, following the selkie and the shark that she rode. I woke sprawled on the rocks with a pounding headache and a tail instead of feet. At first, I assumed I was having another vision, but brackish water surged out of my mouth, spattering on the ground. The acrid stench was real. Vomiting again, I spat out more water while tears trickled down my face. I still had arms, but my body was covered with plush fur like a seal. The oracle said, "Stop weeping." I looked up at the trees and saw an owl, but the raptor's eyes were violet, not amber. The feathered beast opened its beak and said, "I gave you what you wished for." I said, "What have you done to me?" I grabbed a rock and hurled it at the owl, but my aim was off. The chunk of basalt hit the tree trunk. The owl ruffled its feathers and said, "I douse the light, banish the berserker. Berserker dominates Selkie. Selkie dominates Elven. Hence, you've taken Selkie form." "Permanently?" I gasped. I tugged on my tail, yanking it as hard as I could, but it wouldn't come off. The oracle said, "Don't be daft, child. You'll be back in elven form when you're dried." Maneuvering with the tail wasn't easy, and standing without feet was impossible. So I dragged myself across the rocks in my belly. By the time I'd reached my clothes, I'd cut my left hand and my hip. Rubbing the fur with my palms helped it to dry, but my stomach kept gurgling from all the water I'd swallowed and nausea. Was the oracle punishing me for being ashamed of my heritage? Would I ever have legs again? By the time the sun rose, my shoulders and arms ached and my hands were chafed, but I could see skin peeking through the fur. When the fur and tail vanished, my legs reappeared, but my wounds were still seeping. Fortunately, it was January, the coldest month of the year, so my caftan was made from heavy wool, which hid bloodstains. Taking a shortcut, I cut through a field, which was a foolish mistake. The neighbor's bull was loose and chased me until I climbed the fence. Out of breath, I stumbled onto the road. The cottage that I shared with my father was just over the ridge. I picked up my pace, striding faster, though my legs ached. I heard the clopping hooves before I saw the wagon. I ran off of the road, heading towards a big oak tree. Peeking out from behind the old gnarled trunk, I saw a single gray mare pulling the wagon and breathed a sigh of relief. Ogres always drove teams of horses because their cargo was heavy. The mare quit walking and tossed her head. She was the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen. The girl holding the reins, not the horse. Her hair was long and silky, copper red like a flame, and her eyes were jade green with flecks of gold, just like the Selkie I saw when I swam with the oracle. By early March, the orange trees were covered with blossoms, and I'd fallen in love with Giselle. Only a sliver of sun was visible on the horizon, and the drizzle had turned to a deluge, but the moon was full, and we couldn't wait any longer to start a new life together. Giselle's horse broke into a trot as we glimpsed the path that led to the sea. Though I was a decent horsewoman, I wasn't used to riding bareback or not having control of the reins. I squeezed my legs against the mare's side and clung to Giselle. Reaching the dunes, we dismounted. My heart was pounding and my legs were wobbly, like I'd been sprinting. Giselle removed the mare's bridle and let her horse run free. Except for a cluster of gulls sheltering beside the pier, the beach was deserted. We removed our boots and stockings and walked barefoot towards the wet sand, then stopped and gazed at the sea. The waves were crashing. Water lapped at my feet. My skin began to tingle. Giselle placed her hands on my shoulders. Her mouth tasted of seawater and hope. I pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. Both of us were shivering from anticipation. When all of our clothes were pooled on the sand by our feet, Giselle smiled, flashing the dimple in her left cheek. We sealed our bond with another kiss and dove into the surf. The end.
Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Daniel, I'm trying to think of the last time we've been so many different places
I don't
in
know.
1 hour.
Pretty broad range.
It's been really amazing.
Yeah.
I liked it that we started out with Anatoly's flash fiction roulette, and
Mm-hmm.
we've just been going back and forth.
And it always works.
It always works. It's fascinating. We talk about this every time about how we don't actually try to put together a theme or anything. And as far as we know, the authors don't do that either. Although, I don't know, maybe somebody does. But somehow it always ends up feeling like a pretty cohesive evening of stories, which we really love. So thank you both so much. Everyone, this has been a fantastic evening. Please give a big thank you to Alicia Hilton and Anatoly Belilovsky, our readers tonight. Check out more of their work and support the organizations they asked us to talk about tonight. Next week is also going to be fantastic. We have this guy, Daniel Marcus, on, who you heard of before. And we are also going to have Nebula nominee Karen Osborne. So thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for joining us in what Daniel always calls spinning the fictive dream. And we hope to see you next week too.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
It was fantastic.
You really were, both of you. Thank you. So this is Story Hour.